Welcome. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. So glad that you're with us. This is Dayal with my co-host Kishore. Our good friend Achyuta, normally with us, isn't here this week. But this is Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast, and we're so glad that you're here. This week we've been reading from The Journey Within, and we're finishing up this opening section on page 111 called Practicing the Dharma of Bhakti. And before I launch into my brief recap and summary of where we've been this week, just want to check in with Kishore. How are you doing? How is this morning treating you?
This morning is finally treating me better.
Finally treating you better.
Yes, it's finally good.
Okay, Kishore's been on the mend of just sniffles and not feeling super great. And so he's getting better. Alrighty. So this section of practicing the Dharma of Bhakti, a lot of great words coming up. Just the nature of Dharma itself, the nature of the identity of the self, and the idea of spiritual and material consciousness rather than material and spiritual action, not being defined by the thing itself sometimes, but by the consciousness we bring into it. And Ranat Swami gave this really great example of a knife, that the knife can be good or bad depending upon whose hands it's in. In the hand of a surgeon, it can save a life. The hand of a criminal or murderer can take a life. So it's the consciousness with which we use things. And we talked also a little bit about the nature of tuning into our inner knowing and trusting ourselves and being deceived by the mind, and how that's a tricky game to play, and how to navigate that. So our previous episodes this week dived into those topics, and we want to finish off this section of the chapter where Ranat Swami talks about how a spiritualist sees things in the world, that not only our consciousness changes something from material to spiritual, but we can also see things in a completely different light, in a completely different lens. Was that good? Was that good?
That was good. Nice and brief.
Nice and brief. Nice and brief. Martha's nodding her head. Yes. Briefer the better, Dayal. Briefer the better. Okay. Do you want me to read, or you want to read, Kishore?
I will read.
Okay. My voice. There's been enough of my voice in this podcast this week. It's been enough. Anybody else want to come on and host this? Anna, Lane, Vidya? No, they're good.
Okay, so we're starting on page 112. And for those of you that are reading along, we're starting from that third paragraph down that says Bhakti Yogis try. And so it says, Bhakti yogis try to see the world through a spiritual lens and to perceive even material objects in ways that relate to the Supreme. And then they try to use those material things according to that relationship. Once a student asked my teacher, how can we see God in material things? Prabhupada replied, when you see my eyeglasses on the table, what do you see? Well, the student said, these are my guru's glasses. So seeing them makes me remember how much I love you. Prabhupada smiled. As you develop love for God, you will gradually come to see everything as his property. And in being reminded of him, you will feel great love for him. Odd as it may seem, our freedom from this world begins with our developing the eyes to see this world as it really is. By learning to love and serve God while living in this world, we transcend illusion. Through our love for God, we will celebrate the joy of that love and naturally serve with compassion those who are suffering. Beyond material existence is our original home, the spiritual world, where in the light of infinite love, the darkness of suffering and illusion cannot exist.
I'm keeping my lips shut.
There's a lot to be said here. I'll keep it brief too. Um, well, I really like this idea, and I think we can really expand on this because I feel like Radhanath Swami is really touching on this point. It's like he's not saying it, but he is saying it by not saying it, which is that the more that we see everything as God's property or everything in relation to the supreme or to divinity, the more that we're able to see that, the more we'll be able to be in touch with this infinite love, with this compassion in our heart for others, with this, with our higher self, with spiritual qualities. And the more, and then the thing that I feel like he's not saying, but he said it already kind of a couple of times, is that the more that we don't see everything as God's property, the more that we don't see the spiritual underpinnings behind everything in this world, the more that we see material things just as things, or people just as people, to give me pleasure, to use, right? Nature and the world to just use and exploit. The more that we are seeing through this materialistic lens, I feel like what's being said then is, I'm not going to be able to access that joy and that love and that natural compassion in my heart. I'm not going to be able to move into that spiritual realm. I'm going to be stuck, because he says it earlier in that paragraph above. I really liked it, where he went beyond kind of good or bad. And he was saying that it's more about things that are going to foster our spiritual growth or further continue us in material entanglement. And I really, really like that idea in bhakti, because it's not so much, for people coming from maybe like a Judeo-Christian kind of background, or who I was raised in that, kind of a certain type of Christianity. And we've talked about this throughout the week. It's a lot of like good versus bad, and like evil and original sin versus like purity and heaven and all of this stuff. And I really love the way that it's put here, because I feel like it's very practical. It's very simple and realistic, of like, these are things, or this mode of being is going to allow me or give me kind of the tools or the keys to access a higher spiritual self of mine, a higher self of mine. Or over here, these are the actions, and this is the mindset and mood that's going to further entangle me in material things. And so I love, and I'll end here because I do want to hear what you have to say, Dial. I love that he starts to bring out the spiritual qualities, and he starts to bring out like this joy and this love and this compassion for others that are suffering. Like, this is what we're going to be able to access as we start to see the world through these spiritual lenses. Is that plural? Lenses, something like
Lenses is a plural word.
that. Is it? Okay.
Lenses. I have no idea how you would spell that. Lenss.
Maybe something like that.
Lenses.
Yeah.
Lenses. Somebody want to look that up? Lenses, plural.
Hmm.
Lenses. Lenses. That's our takeaway.
Boom. That's our takeaway.
Boom. Is that it? Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. I'm waiting for you.
My turn to speak now. I should go. I should say something. Um, I just more had questions. You have been on a journey in your life. You traveled around the world. You've been in various. You were raised in a very specific Judeo-Christian background. As you mentioned, Jehovah's Witness. You were raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and you lived in India for a while, and you came across the path of bhakti as it comes from the Vedic tradition, and you've also gone through a various career phases in your life, whether it's in social work, and then you're a yoga teacher. Now you working at the Bhakti Center. You've lived in an ashram at the Bhakti Center, and you live on your own here in Brooklyn. Um, and this idea in the book that we're reading, it's almost kind of like anything could be spiritual or material depending on the consciousness you bring in it. Nothing is inherently good or bad. It's how you view it or how you use it.
Mm.
And at the same time, sometimes there are things that we need to cut out of our life, Or sometimes there are, in the Bhagavad Gita, they use these words of karma, akarma, and vikarma.
Mhm.
Karma meaning, entangled action. Akarma means like detached action. And vikarma just means like horrific action, like things that you should just never do. And so I'm just wondering, in your life, throughout your spiritual evolution and growth, throughout your personal development, education, and growth, like, have you how do people in general, also how you personally, like, identify, um there's that beautiful story of Raghunath, our friend Raghunath, who's in a hardcore band, and one of his teachers, um Satyaraj, also the author, legal name Stephen Rosen, who was a mentor for him, and a teacher in his early years of spiritual life. And he found out that, um, this person, Satyaraj, played guitar and was a guitar player. And he asked him, he said, "Why don't you play guitar?" And he said, "Oh, for me, it's Maya, it's illusion.
Mm,
It's illusion." And Raghunath's like, "Well, what are you talking about? You said that anything can be used in God's service, and that's what I'm doing. I'm in a rock band, and I'm singing for Krishna, and I'm doing all of these things." And he said, "Yes, but for me, I recognize it was illusion.
mm,
For me, I recognize it was illusion." And then there was that famous statement, if you've heard the story from Raghunath, he said, "Next time you're on stage, ask yourself if you're trying to serve God or be God."
mm,
And that mentality. But Satyaraj was making the point, like, for me, I recognize that it was actually something that was taking me away,
mm,
from where I wanted to be. And so it's not that, for some people it may be okay, for some people not. And so how do we navigate what, when something can't be spiritualized,
mm,
or it is actually illusion for us, or we do need to cut something out of our life, whether it's a person or an activity, or an object,
mm,
um rather than just giving ourselves this carte blanche that, like,
mm.
anything can be spiritualized, and anything may be able to be spiritualized, but maybe I'm not, it's a little too close for home for me. And so I'm just curious, how do people know when something just needs a change of consciousness, and when something actually just needs to be cut out of your life because it's harmful.
That's a great question, and I really like kind of like the personal way that you put it in, because that's going to be my answer. Very personal. Um, I don't think it's a one size fits all formula, like you were telling the story of Raghunath and
Yeah.
Satyaraj. And it's interesting because it was yesterday, I think, that we were talking about this bhakti principle. It's a principle in bhakti. It's called yukta vairagya, like everything being able to be utilized in Krishna service, or in a spiritual way. And I mentioned yesterday that Srila Prabhupada, our teacher's teacher, gives this definition of that this person who is taking superior direction, right? Is taking direction from above. And we kind of went into that yesterday about like kind of societies, or kind of like this general feeling of not want of wanting to go against authority and stuff like that. And not wanting to take instruction, for a variety of reasons. It's societal, and at the same time it's personal. And you mentioned a lot of stuff about me and my personal journey, and I know that for myself, I can say that I was really against rules, regulations, society. I was really against all of it. I was really just like, because I was raised in a very, very, like you mentioned, kind of intense Jehovah's Witness, like super crazy, follow the rules, upbringing. And so then when I went away from that, I kind of had this like big break off from all of that. And I was just like, you know what? Like you don't know me. I'm gonna do what I think is best for me, and etc. And I mean, to put it very simply, I did what I thought was best for me, and I realized after a couple of years that I didn't know what was best for me. And
Mm.
I had to go through the motions of doing the things that I thought were good for me, and then realizing that I got myself into, just a really big mess. And whether that be in my personal life or in, different places, I realized that like it wasn't necessarily working. And I realized also that no one could have told me that, you know? If someone would have told me that, I wouldn't have listened. If someone would have told me like, look, you're gonna think that you know what's best, and then you're gonna do it, and then you're gonna realize that actually you don't know what's best for you. I would have been like, screw you, like, no, absolutely not. I needed to go through kind of like the ups and downs of my journey of doing what I thought was quote unquote best for me. And then realizing like, oh wow, I've got a lot of stuff going on here. I kept on finding myself in similar situations
Mm.
that weren't necessarily good or good, let's put that here. Or I found myself in certain relationships that weren't necessarily good for me, or in certain places in my life that weren't necessarily good for me. And this idea of like surrender or authority or like taking superior direction, it is something that's very, I think for a lot of people, it can be something a little bit like, what's the word? Just like abrasive or, kind of intense of just like, I'm surrendering to you and just please tell me what to do. It's kind of a lot. And I really think it's a super personal thing and it's a super personal process. And I also think that it really depends on um I'm gonna call it like divine timing and fate. I'm just gonna put those words out there, however you're taking it.
Divine timing and fate.
Divine timing and fate. And because I really believe that for you to surrender to someone, to a teacher, to a guru, to whatever, like you have to want to do that. You have to like really want to do that in your heart. And therefore the relationship between you and said, teacher, whether that's a spiritual teacher or whatever type of teacher, you have to like want to have that relationship to go deep. It has to feel like right. you know I remember when
Yeah.
I was thinking about the possibility of wanting a spiritual teacher. One of the advices that I received was to really, really do my due diligence, and to really like hear what this teacher, or at that time, these different teachers that I was looking into, to like really, really hear what they had to say, and to not just hear what they had to say this year,
Mm.
to really go back 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years and hear what they've been saying. And it was like the best advice that I'd ever received, because I think that sometimes when it comes to spirituality, especially kind of like modern, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday, kind of like modern new age spirituality, we take we tend to take things just like at face value, or like if it sounds pretty and if it sounds enlightening and if it sounds, whatever, it's just like, yeah, or if it resonates with me right now in the moment, it's like, yes, this is beautiful. Oh, wow. I love it. It's like, I'm not saying that that's not valid, but I think that there really does need to be a deeper relationship for an actual authentic and sustainable surrender to take place. Because if not, then I feel like I haven't answered your question, because if not, then this because the original question was about how do I know what are the things that need to come out of my life, and how do I know certain things that I can spiritualize or not spiritualize or whatever. And I think that maybe the answer for that is that you have to really, we talked about this yesterday, but you have to really like be honest with yourself and be real with yourself and know yourself. And it has to be done from a level of authenticity and sustainability. Because if you're doing it to just please someone else because you think that that's what you're supposed to do, or everyone else is doing it, so I'm giving it up too, I don't personally think that's sustainable. Like you really have to know, like, actually this guitar is not good for me, or actually this, I don't know, this dating is not good for me, or actually this, whatever is not good for me. And something I will say, and I'll kind of go off the spiritual platform. I mean, everything's spiritual. But I'll give an example. This was like a long time ago. I had this realization before I like dove into bhakti and the whole thing. I had this realization a long time ago, and there's a moral to the story, and I'll tell it to you at the beginning. The moral of the story is to not be afraid to go against the grain a little bit.
Mm.
Because I remember when I was like young, I was in high school. I had like a high school boyfriend or whatever. And it was all like romantic, just like, it's gonna be how it was in the movies. It wasn't like that. And anyway, I'm not gonna go too into this because it's a lot. But
Let's start back on our high school crushes.
but in general, gay culture is very, and I'm being very general. I really hope to not receive like, actually, no, I'm just going to be very real. In general,
He
gay
wants to receive
culture
it.
is very, in general, gay culture is very like, it's just very like apps and quick, and it's been labeled as having a lot of promiscuity and people not just being
Mm.
really into relationships and this stuff. And I'm telling you all that that is kind of true. There's like an element of truth to that. And I remember in my 20s, like with my friends, with my gay friends, I was really kind of like, I don't want to do that, like that's not who I am, and it's not good for me. Actually, like it actually is really toxic for me. Like I just need to be in a relationship. Like you might not need that, but I need that. And I was seen as like, my friends did not like that. They were like, you're crazy, you're too much, you're this, like what's wrong with you, like, because I wasn't going with the norm. And I really kind of like stood by my guns. Is that a thing? Or held my arms?
Stand your ground.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Stand your ground. There is something,
Something with
stand
guns,
by
right?
your guns.
I don't know.
I'm gonna
I
look it
really
up.
stood my
I'm looking
ground.
it up. Lenses and
Let me.
stand by your guns. I mean, maybe in today's world, guns isn't a great reference,
No, it's not a great reference.
but stand by your guns is a song, and I'm
Is
looking
it a
it up.
song? By who?
The full English.
Exactly who I was referencing. That's exactly.
I have no-
No, but I really stood my ground, and I think that like knowing yourself and not being afraid.
Stick to your guns.
Stick to your guns.
Stick
Yeah,
to your guns is the phrase, and hold your ground. Stick to
yeah.
your guns, hold your and
The
we're
tune.
not gonna go. We're not gonna reference guns, so we're gonna say
Holding your ground.
hold your ground.
Okay. So yeah, I think like not being afraid to hold your ground and not being like influenced so easily kind of by the status quo. And it sounds something like simple, but it's a lot harder than you think. There were a lot of moments, going back to my example, where I thought like, am I wrong? Like
Mm.
maybe I don't know myself. Like maybe they're right. Maybe I should just be, whimsical and, flippant and just like go do the whole thing and whatever. And I really did hold my ground, and it paid off because I really like realized like, oh yeah, this is how I am, and this is who I am, and this is what works for me. And I think something really important here is that to understand this concept that you gave, I'm speaking for a long time, we're almost reaching time,
Mm.
is that it's going to look different for everyone, like. And I remember going back to my example in like gay culture and whatever, there was a moment where I got a little self-righteous, and I got a little like, all of you are this and this and this and this and this, and why aren't you like this and this and this? And that was not healthy. It wasn't good, because I think everyone has their own journey. Everyone has the right and dignity, in my opinion, to figure
Mm.
out what works for them and what doesn't work for them, what needs to be cut out in their life or what doesn't need to be cut out in their life. And I don't think that it's my job or our job to say like, this is bad behavior, or this is bad for you, or this is etc. Of course there are extreme circumstances and family and this and whatever, close friends, but I think in general, this mood of like me thinking I know what's best for you is really something that's going to be hurtful and detrimental. And I the last thing I'll say about this is that being authentic and honest in your own journey, and just like knowing what brings you joy and love, knowing what brings you expansiveness and a feeling of ease is really important. Knowing what makes you feel contracted, knowing what makes you feel small is really important, or what makes you feel trapped is really important. And I also think that looking for instruction and looking for teachers and looking for that is something really important. It's something that I realized through my life. It's like, you know what? It got to a point in my life where I was like, I can't do this on my own. Like I thought I could, but I can't, you know? And it really started to become a burden of feeling very alone, like thinking that I had to do everything on my own. Because I had you were talking about me going all over the world, and this, I had this very intense feeling of like priding myself on being self-reliant. And after a while that got very tiresome. I was just like, actually, you know what, maybe I don't know, maybe this isn't working, maybe, you know, whatever. And taking seriously, like looking for instruction, whether that be through a teacher or whatever, etc. But I also think something that's important is taking that seriously. Like, you know, like I mentioned earlier, like that advice that I received from my friend of doing my due diligence of like, who is this teacher and what are they saying and what, and does it vibe with me? Does it make my heart feel expansive and open, or not? You know, I don't think anything should ever be done kind of flippantly or whimsically. There is gravity in how we approach things. And I hope I answered the question. I don't know. I went off into a lot of different, I went off into a lot of
That is
different.
all the time we have here today. I think it's beautiful, and I think that you're very vulnerable, and you're also very real, and you were bringing in the context of personal life as well as how you see it, and also speaking to other people's lives as well. Um, I would love to get some takeaways from Kimberly, our taker awayer, and then we're gonna shoot it back to Kishore to see what he's taken away from what he said. You got anything for us, Kimberly?
Yeah, I do. So today I have seeing everything as God's property and everything in relation to divinity gives us the tools or keys to access love, joy, and compassion. Everyone has their own journey and it looks different for everyone. Sometimes we need to go through our own personal experiences to understand what is truly best for us. And lastly, hold your ground, stand in your truth, and don't be afraid to go against the grain.
Go against the grain. Reminds me of like a previous episode when we were like anarchy, down with the system,
I
bring
remember.
it down, deconstruct. It was deconstructing society. There's some dismantle the power. Kimberly wrote.
Yes.
Some of Kishore's favorite
I really like
topics.
that Dana K wrote, and this is a whole nother conversation. Dana K wrote, I'm realizing it's super important who I surround myself with all the time. Lane, I love what Lane just said, divine honesty with the self.
And a green heart emoji, the same color as her hair. What's something you're taking away, Kishore?
Something I'm taking away is Radhanath Swami says this in the passage we just read. He says that through our love for God, we will celebrate the joy of that love and naturally serve with compassion those who are suffering. And that's really important for me as kind of like a litmus test. You know, we talked about kind of like my journey and standing in our truth and holding our ground. But something that I'm really taking away is that if I'm holding my ground and thinking that my way is the right way and that you're all just nonsense, then something is wrong. Like that's a good litmus test to have. Like if I'm holding my ground but I think that all of you are idiots, something is wrong in my spiritual processing here. Because what's supposed to be happening is like I'm understanding that me holding my ground is because this is my personal journey, but really truly like embodying and understanding that you are also on your personal journey, and that love and compassion are supposed to be arising in my heart. And if instead of love and compassion, there's like bitterness and criticism arising in my heart, then that's a good litmus test to kind of see where I'm at in my journey.
Yeah, like that. Um, I'm walking away with just really doing an assessment of things in my life. And, if this idea of what is spiritual and what's material, um, the idea of spiritual being infinite, the idea of spiritual being connected to the self, higher power, etc. Um, I don't need a lot in my life necessarily because the things that I have fill up the space. And I think sometimes the consciousness of just like adding more and adding more and adding more comes from this. It means that there must be an overflux of material things because they're not all adding up. And if I really get to a place where I have a few deeply spiritual things, deeply spiritual like relationships, whatever it is, I'll find my place, self in a space where I'm not needing to constantly add things. And so if I'm just checking, like, how often am I feeling I need to add things into my life? And also, are there things that I can let go of just so that I can focus on a few things more deeply rather than having a million and one things that I'm just kind of scratching the surface on? So as a manifesting generator in the human design, that's something for me to work on. Um, and so I'm walking away with that. Love you guys so much. Thank you for being here. Today's Thursday. We're no podcast tomorrow or Friday. We'll post it in our Rise app. But we are going on a digital detox. So today, after this podcast, Kishore and I are going to load a bunch of stuff up into a car, drive upstate, put our phones in a closet, and not look at them till Sunday. And so don't try to message us. And if you do, we'll get back to you on Monday when our phones blow up from you have 872,000 WhatsApp messages from Martha and Kimberly and Lane. But yeah, so we're doing that. So no podcast tomorrow, but we'll pick it up on Monday. And we won't send you pictures because we're not going to be taking any. And we'll see you on the flip side. Until then, be well. But one thing you can join, if you want to join, tomorrow, Saturday, Saturday, our friend Yogi Charu is leading a Prana-Vidya training. Go to bhakticenter.org. He's leading an online, if you want to do Prana-Vidya, pranic healing, physical and subtle body healing through the power of energy, movement, and breath. It's a really beautiful opportunity. So if you haven't checked it out, go check that out. And we'll see y'all next time. Take care, everybody. Be well. Bye-bye. Thank you.